All right, Runa, thank you so much for joining me to explore your journey into supervision. Perhaps we could start by oh yes, by the way, I was looking at your website and I was really impressed by in a way, the range of activities you've done to bring you to this world. So I'm curious, who are you as a person, but also as a coach? What's your background?
Big question. Where do I start? Who am I as a person? Gosh, I think we're all kind of figuring that out as we go along, aren't we? And kind of ever evolving. But as I just said to you, I'm from Wales. I grew up. Sorry, I was born in Bangladesh. Grew up in Wales and came to London about 15 years ago. And I think it's my interest in coaching has evolved from my experience of life. Growing up as a minoritized person in Wales, I was always interested in how we empower ourselves and how people navigate through problems and find solutions, because I didn't have that guide as a first generation ethnic minority in Wales. So I think that quest to find guidance and ways to move through life was something that really inspired me. And I worked in the space of equality, race equality, gender equality, and I think I've always done coaching without knowing that I'd done coaching, because it was about empowering other people and empowering communities as a result. So I think that's the first thing that got me interested. Though I didn't know I was doing coaching, I then became a therapist about 15 years ago. And I trained as a hypnotherapist. And as I was moving through that, I was unknowingly using coaching in my work. And then I came into working for the Leadership Academy, the NHS Leadership Academy, about 10 years ago. And of course, coaching is a key and valuable leadership development tool. So then I came to realize coaching was a thing. And as a result, I then trained and as a coach about, I think it was about 2017. And yes, and fell in love with coaching. Yeah.
How did you find, it's sort of a side question really, but how did you find that the coaching fitted alongside hypnotherapy? Because in a way, to me at least, it sounds like they're quite different, but perhaps they're not. Like, what's your sense of that?
Yeah, I think the more I get into my coaching work, the more I realize I can use um, hypnotherapy tools and techniques to deepen my coaching work. So sometimes, for instance, when I'm working somatically, I get people to relax in their body. And that's what hypnosis is. It's about getting you into a relaxed state and allowing you to be relaxed enough to enter parts of your unconscious or your subconscious to be able to bring information to the surface. Um, or even, once you've done that and become aware of some of the root causes and awareness of the circumstances around the issue, you can then suggest and work with the individual to empower the things that they want to bring about in their lives. So, whilst they have two different labels, there is an empowerment. Like we do a lot of empowerment in the coaching that we do. It goes hand in hand, um, because the I suppose the outcome of it, the goal of it is to work with the client to understand what it is that they want to transform in their lives, what they want to create in their lives. So yeah, it works hand in hand, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was really curious about, because in a way it resonated with me very strongly, the idea that you were coaching before you knew coaching. And that was very similar history to me as well. Um, and other people don't know about coaching until they start coaching, like they have to do a qualification. And one of the things you mentioned was the idea of being, well, the word you used was minoritized, which I thought was a really interesting word because it sort of puts the emphasis on where that is coming from. And I was curious to what extent, as a result of that, systemic thinking has entered your work as a coach, because it seems to me that you were coaching before you knew about coaching, and it was coaching from a place of how do I fit into systems and how do I help other people fit into systems and the forces that constrain us or propel us and so on. So what's been your experience of systemic thinking, which is such a critical part of supervision?
Mm. So again, really interesting because there's so many lenses you can put on it, and so many dimensions of systems that I've worked with. So when I bring it back to myself, in my own community, in my own experience of the culture, the tradition, the barriers that I've experienced as a first generation ethnic woman, I worked with systems within my own traditions. And then, of course, in my outer world, working within government systems or public sector, private sector, in charities and what have you, it's changing systems from the outside to enable people to access services and to be, treated more equal and what have you. So depending on what focus, what lens I'm using to focus in and the work that I'm doing, I suppose that's the kind of systemic lens that comes in handy. And then on a meta level, it all comes in handy when you're navigating and working with individuals who are experiencing, particularly around the diversity and inclusion field, who are experiencing systemic discrimination or disadvantage. So yeah, and I continuously learning about it as well. The more I grow in the work and the more I grow, work with people, I get to understand it from other people's lenses as well and allow myself to evolve through it.
Mm, very interesting. This feels like a conversation that I could go down a completely different channel with you because I'm always fascinated by the balance between you used the word empowerment, and I would say I think of systemic versus personal agency and the balance between those two different things in a way to some degree polar opposites, and yet they live in the same world. But I guess that's a separate conversation. I'd love to have that one day. Nonetheless, let's talk about supervision. And how did you get to supervision? So there you were. You've been a coach. You trained formally in 2017, and then I think a couple of years ago you joined us to do the supervision course. What provoked you to do that?
So actually, I became a supervisor 2 years before I started the course with you guys. So I quickly moved through coaching because I was managing the coaching and mentoring system for the NHS in London at the time. So become really aware of coaching. I was managing a database of around 600 coaches and mentors developing then, so that we can provide an internal service for the NHS. And of course, one of the remits was to help our coaches and mentors develop. And the gap that I saw was that of supervision. And so I developed a pool of my own supervisors within that system. And trained myself with Robin Showett on the seven-eyed model. And yeah, I started to really get a real understanding of the depth and the power of supervision for our coaches, and fell in love with it. And so I also then felt like I needed to have a accredited qualification, because Robin's program wasn't accredited; it was the certificate. And so, yeah, I came across your school and did the training with yourself, trained by Yannick and Mia, which was real great fun. And yeah, and that's now my supervision, both my coaching practice and my supervision practice has grown as well. I've now left the NHS and I've gone independent as well. So yeah, I'm having fun with that, navigating new spaces.
I want to come back to that going independent because I had a conversation with somebody else who's just done the same thing. He was a full-time coach and supervisor, and now he's going independent. I want to come back to that if I may. But to go back to the course side of things, so that's fantastic. You trained with Robin, who's a wonderful person and a fantastic thinker around supervision, of course. When you then did the formal course, did you learn anything new, or did it feel like you were just there? I don't mean this in a detrimental sense, but did you feel like you were there just to get the certificate, or did you find, wow, there's stuff here I wasn't even aware of? Like, what was the growing edge for you, if any?
Yeah, I did. I absolutely learned so much more. It took my own tools, techniques, awareness deeper. So with Robin, I did we trained in the seven-eyed model alone, and of course learned so much from that. But I was able to take that much deeper with an almost a year's container of training. So that was the face to face, not face to face. Sorry, it was the online classroom based work, and then the portfolio as well, the writing up of the essays and what have you, and also the RPGs. Remind me what that stands for.
Reflective practice,
Like,
like reflective practice group.
yeah, they were really useful as well. So, yeah, it allowed to take the work much deeper. It also allowed me to consolidate all the tools that I had um, and become more confident and self assured in the supervision that I did. Yeah.
And obviously, your journey to be a supervisor has been slightly unusual in as much you did that training first with Robin and then with us and so on. So perhaps you don't remember the first encounter you had with supervision, but I'll ask you anyway. What when transitioning from coach to supervisor, do you remember what felt most challenging or different for you? Because a lot of coaches, when they first become supervisor, are like, whoa, I didn't expect to do that. Or I didn't expect to have to put that hat on or whatever. Like, do you remember what was challenging or interesting for you?
Yeah, interesting question. It was a long time ago. For me was keeping keeping to the surface all the different eyes. So the lens, so being able to intricately hold the vision and the vantage point from different perspectives was really a skill that I didn't think I had the ability to do because it seems so complex. And only someone like Robin can do, somebody who's, that experienced and knowledgeable. Um, and so it did take me a little time to really get into a place where I was comfortable to come into as a supervisor. So I held off for a little while, and then realized that if it's now, it's never. And then as I came into it, yes, with some trepidation, but with some experience also, I felt like I grew quite quickly, and that I had the tools and knowledge, and that it was myself that held myself back.
Yeah. I actually remember reading the Seven Eyed Model. I don't remember what year it was, probably early 2000s. And it blew my mind how complicated it seemed. And when I came back to it years later, I thought, what? That's actually simple. I don't know what had to shift in my mind, but it felt so complicated. So when you said that about how you questioned yourself, I thought, yeah, I can really feel that because it feels like a complicated model, but it really isn't, is it? Once you understand how to take that sort of step back.
Yeah, yeah, it's having that meta vision on it. And in my head, and it's called the 7-eye model, but I keep accidentally calling it the 9-eyed model. So I wonder if there's another eye, because I know there's a 6A. So there's already 8 eyes on it. I wonder if there's another eye coming.
Maybe there is. Maybe there is. You know what? The 6A I've always loved. It's a very powerful one. I've always, because I don't know if you feel this when you're supervising, but you often do develop some fantasy relationship with the end user, whether it's one of annoyance or compassion or whatever, but you feel it. Do you tend to find 6A coming up in your practice?
Yeah, and sometimes I have to hold myself back and check in. Is that my stuff? Is that my assumption, my expectation? And what am I projecting on to the client if I'm not catching myself do it? And I think it does come with some experience as well. And then taking that to supervision too. So that's another area of interest of mine is supervisor supervision, um, which I did develop in the NHS, but I've not come across it outside the NHS. So, yeah, it would be really useful to get some supervision as a supervisor.
Absolutely. I remember asking Robert Sherry that very question when I interviewed him a few years ago. And I said to him, who do you go to for your ongoing development and supervision? And I think at first he was a little taken aback that I was challenging him, but I wasn't. It wasn't a leading question or a challenge. It was genuine. And then he realized that it was more about peers at that level. There's a point where your supervisors are your peers as opposed to a supervisor. But it's a fascinating question. Maybe that's the ninth eye. The supervisor. So tell me, if you wouldn't mind, Bruno, like what do you find are some of the most common challenges or common themes that you deal with in supervision? What are coaches coming to you with?
And, as you know, it's all very varied. But I think if I'm thinking about themes, what comes up a lot is the difference between coaching and therapy. And there's a lot of trepidation, especially from new coaches who are who don't know, who feel like they don't know the boundary between the two. Um, and and that boundary, I think, for me, can be quite blurred, especially as a therapist as well. And I often use one of my styles of working is using a therapeutic approach to coaching. And so yeah, it's helping coaches move through that with often they seek permission to enter into those spaces. So exploring some of that, and getting them okay and less fearful of exploring and having a sense of authority with a little a to hold that space as a coach and be confident, and to grow in that way. The other thing that I find that people have problems with is interrupting a coachee when a coachee might be quite talkative. Um, and then also what's directive and non directive coaching. So I think I get a lot of coaches who feel pure coaching is non directive coaching, and anything outside of that is mentoring. So I bring them back to that spectrum of directive and non directive coaching and exploring that space as well. And again, allowing permission, without actually saying that this gives you permission. It's just that in that exploration, it allows them the permission to experiment and explore more. Yeah.
Yeah. That first issue you mentioned is a fascinating one because are you finding that about the therapy and coaching? Because are you finding that number one, coaching itself has had an identity shift where it's moved more towards a kind of connection with therapy in a way. It's less resistant to emotion than it used to be in the old days when it was very black and white. And then secondly, clients themselves are more tuned into their mental and emotional feelings perhaps than they were 20 years ago. So clients are coming in a way with issues that feel more potentially therapeutic, even though it's still coaching. Is that kind of what you're experiencing in general?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it kind of goes hand in hand because we're working with human beings and we human beings have emotions. And I think what we're coming back to, and again, this is another thing that's really important to me because another hat I wear is one of working with indigenous practices as as a therapist and a healer. So um, the idea of being tuned in to your own nature and understanding what's happening. Everything brings up emotion, good, bad, exciting, whatever it may be. And so, what's that emotion, that then drives you or doesn't drive you, you know? And also, I think, didn't coaching come from therapy?
It's got its mixed roots, hasn't it? Because some would say it's come from management theory and sports coaching. If you look at the Timothy Galway route, but I agree with you. I think increasingly what's really influencing coaching is the more therapeutic. But I mean, you've got the rise of things like transactional analysis coaching and psychodynamic coaching. So it started here, but I feel like it's shifted its ground over here. And that's kind of presenting both an opportunity and a challenge for coaches because they're now like, whoa, hold on, where is that line? Because when I started as a coach in the early 2000s, Runa, I remember somebody saying, emotions don't belong in coaching. I mean, I didn't take any notice, but I remember being told that. That's how black and white it was back in the day, you know? So I kind of question like what's happening in coaching and I think is a good thing, but I can also see why it would raise a lot more gray areas, let's say.
Right. Yeah. And it's all dependent on the coach as well and their style and the type of coaching that they do. Yeah.
So just to begin to wrap this up, you mentioned that you've left the NHS, you're building your independent practice now. I'm curious about the future for you as a coach, what and a supervisor. What do you see ahead for yourself now?
So it's a new space for me. So I'm just moving in and feeling into the energies and the opportunities and what brings me alive and what's important to me. And so I've been doing a lot of neurodiversity coaching. So that fits in really well with my with my passion around diversity and inclusion. And of course there is a new rise in awareness of neurodiversity. So I'm learning a lot and having a lot of fun in that space. I'm also doing mental health coaching as well, which again goes hand in hand. Um, and in my supervision practice, I do a lot of group supervision, which I really enjoy. So I'd like to build in more one-to-one supervision. Um, And also move into new spaces like offering supervision on programs and courses, coaching training, for instance, and also internal systems, internal coaching systems within larger organizations and what have you, where there are a pool of coaches already that are inbuilt as a resource for that organization. So I think supervision isn't. I think we can do more with supervision and provide more of it. And, in terms of improving the quality and standard of our profession as well, it's inherent. So I think the course that you're doing, the course that you're providing is that not only is it great fun, but it's actually giving us coaches who want to grow and develop, such great opportunity to grow into those spaces and support the profession, and as well as cascade the work that we're doing into the societies, communities, organizations that we want to make a difference in.
Wow, I love that. That sounds like my manifesto. I should copy that and put it on our website. Runa, thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate you sharing your journey. Is there anything else you'd like to share for somebody listening about the experience of being a supervisor or the impact you make before anything I've not brought out of you?
I think training as a supervisor and doing supervision really helps to develop your practice as a coach, and enables you to hold that space in a more self assured way, but allows us to do that intricate work and to notice and see what's happening in a coaching practice and applying those tools and models better in our own practices as well. So I think there are so many different layers of value in becoming a coach. So I highly recommend it.
Thank you so much, Runa.